Welcome to the Shame-Free Zone. Really glad that you joined me today. We do have a trigger warning for this broadcast. We're going to be talking about sexual assault and rape, but don't despair. We are not all glum over here, even though both I and my guest, Dr. Nancy Moonstarr, are sexual assault survivors. We're going to be talking about how to heal that, not just for ourselves, but also for men who perpetrate. So please stay tuned and feel free to post your questions and your comments below. Nancy, welcome to the Shame-Free Zone. I'm just so happy that you're here.
Me too. I'm just delighted to be here and help anyone at all, and you and me, and and I'm very curious what it is that got you curious about this topic and to do this.
Well, I'm a sexual assault survivor, and I've had quite a journey with that. By the way, I am not sure that this, I know it went into our recording, but I'm just going to say once again, trigger warning, y'all. Dr. Nancy Moonstarr and I are both sexual assault survivors. And in a minute, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, but she and I just can't wait to dig into this topic. And one of the things that I want to share with you is that we have both been on a very profound healing journey, and we want to bring to you a message of healing too, and not just for sexual assault survivors, but for men who have perpetrated as well. So, okay, back to your question, Nancy. As a sexual assault survivor, I found a lot of resources early on that helped me really connect with how profound the damage was to me. I really got how it had shaped portions of my life, how it was impacting my health and my mental and emotional well-being. And I got lots of help for healing that. And it was awesome. But there was just one thing that was left out of the whole mix. I didn't find a lot that was helping me reclaim my sexuality in a joyful, fulfilling way. I didn't find a lot of resources for that. I finally found something from Stacey Haynes, who's a somatic psychologist, and she wrote a book called The Survivor's Guide to Sex. Excellent resource. It's got exercises in it, and I recommend it to my clients all the time. Lovely book. But I mean, that was kind of it. And so as a certified sexologist, I really want to help people find ways to be joyfully connected to their sexuality, regardless of what they have done or what has been done to them. That's my mission in life, is to really create healing. So, and I think you and I have a similar mission statement. As a matter of fact, if it's okay with you, I'd love to introduce our viewers to you by reading your bio. Is that all right?
That's great. Sure.
Cool. Okay. So Dr. Nancy Moonstarr's mission is to inspire men to get to the heart of what matters in intimacy, so they understand and create meaningful connection to their partner while finding grander satisfaction with all of their life. This is one thing you and I definitely share together, the idea that sex informs the rest of our life. All of it, our creativity, our health, our longevity, and even our professional aspirations. Dr. Nancy is in service to shift men's awareness in the realm of their own and their partner's intimacy. She developed the 5 stages of intimacy, which has a very evocative title, Conversation to Penetration, which is actually our topic today, so that men can get the picture of body, mind, and spiritual intimacy. This groundbreaking method empowers heterosexual men to learn skills to connect in mutual fashion, where he and she rise together. Nancy has created a movement called the Times Right movement, where she believes men and women rise together, supporting each other in the process. I think that's a beautiful vision for our future. She assists individuals and couples to overcome past intimate experiences which lacked sex positivity. And as a relationship coach, I encounter this all the time. People that have been married for 10, 20 years and are actually, unfortunately, indulging in lack of consent in their relationship. So we're going to be talking about that today too. Nancy has multiple degrees in psychology, and her career spans 40 years. And she's been a human service provider, assisting clients by collaboratively using her empathic understanding of all sides of an issue. This is one of the reasons, Nancy, I want to have this conversation with you. We live in such a polarized culture right now, and being able to nuance our conversations and really look at all sides is just crucial if the human animal is going to evolve. I really believe that. So we'll be doing that today. Nancy's expertise also includes differently abled populations, including 12 and a half years as a psychology associate in the prison system. And Nancy, I have to tell you, I would like to start right there. I'd like to go back to prison where you were working and just share with the viewers what happened when you were raped.
Well, let's see, where do I begin? I guess I remember that if you wanted to trick me, because rapists trick, and it's a low point for a man to rape. You know, he's not feeling strong. It's a desperate, powerless, rage-filled entitled event. And I think I remember the distraction he asked for, which would be a great one for me. He wanted one of my sister's books. And I was in my office at work, and of course I then turned, and he took advantage of that, slamming the door and pushing me and taking over.
Oh my God.
And I remember struggling, and then having the moment of, oh, this is a woman's greatest fear, because I didn't have control of being raped, you know, that flashed. And I even remembered some training decades previous where self-defense experts were teaching how to do things to a guy that would harm him and would bring harm, such as gouging out his eyes. Now, the problem with that is that you have to be really ready for the consequences if you don't pull it off, which I knew I couldn't pull off.
Yeah.
And so I went into this sort of space of realizing that I had to survive. It was like a survival instinct they talk about overcomes. And I just gave in and just was. And at a certain point, he was complete. And then he started pacing and he started getting stepped up. And I could tell he was going to get violent. And I was thinking, oh shit, I thought he was just going to rape me. And I had a death experience. And so I went into another realm, and it was an extremely interesting experience for me. And I saw my father, who had transitioned, I call it. He passed two weeks previous, was
Wow.
actually guiding me.
Wow.
And he was sort of saying, when I was thinking, this is it, and you know, I'm going to die, he was like, no, that's not what this is about. And I knew truth. And so, yeah, instantly I went, oh, you know, and it's a very neutral realm. And it was almost like the breath on this side is just like an in breath. And then the out breath, you're on the other side of the veil, you know, not in the physical.
Wow.
And he kind of worked with me to, and I remember observing that it was soft bodies and what it was like. I didn't see the white light. Had read a lot about near-death experiences, and I just was observing things, and I had questions, and he basically guided me back and told me what to say to get out of it. And I was more like, well, I guess I don't have anything to lose. I don't know how to navigate this. And it turned out that it did work. And
What was it that worked, Nancy?
well, he told me to act nonchalant. And
your dad did.
yeah, and so I came back into my body. And as part of this experience, there was almost like a couple of timelines happening at the same time. For example, I had flashes of which of my kids, would anybody miss me if I died? And, and I was thinking, well, my younger son would. And then I also had questions about my life, and I was shown like a flash of my life. And I was sort of thinking, I guess I'll go in front of a high council and it'll be reviewed. And well, the high council was me. we,
Yeah, well, I've heard that's true.
we, we review our own life. And I remember sort of at the moment going, oh, I guess that makes sense. I hadn't killed anybody. I hadn't harmed it, but I had made lower choices. I had dimmed myself down. I hadn't been assertive. I hadn't spoken up. I hadn't stood up for the little person. There were things that I did that were lesser. And when I saw those and how they affected me, and it was like every decision, every experience you have flashes. It's all there, and it was in a nanosecond. So it left with me that, oh, that I want to. Oh, I don't like that. I remember something.
Right. So it's almost like you had both, you were both raped, and because you thought you were going to die, you had a near-death experience as well.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And
when you went back into your body, Nancy, and your dad, who had just died 2 weeks before, thank God he was there for you. He told you to act nonchalantly. So was that difficult for you? Were you angry? Were you scared? How was it for you to try to act nonchalantly with your rapist?
I was scared and I was tense, but I knew that to stay even, just as even as possible, and to talk, not go silent somehow. So I started engaging and talking him out of the office, making
Right.
and making an agreement that I wouldn't report him, that things would be okay, and this type of conversation.
Right. Which of course you did report him.
Yes, and of which.
Because one of the things I want to make clear to our viewers is that you definitely believe in consequences for rape.
Yes, that nobody can escape consequences of their actions, really.
Yeah.
And he even did, after he realized he was going to be caught and I got him out, and he even came back and accused me, you lied to me, one of those. And I said, you lied to me.
All right. It's so difficult.
And also this reminds me that when people don't speak, play fair, all bets are off. You can't play with the same rules that you and I are talking about right here.
Absolutely. So, I couldn't agree more.
Okay.
Whatever it takes to survive. I mean, you are in prison with an inmate who has just raped you. Mm-hmm. So absolutely all bets are off.
Yeah. So let's see, what else I remember? I knew instantly my husband didn't love me. All of a sudden I was transbuoyant with everything, and my life kind of came through.
Right.
And it was interesting because they couldn't find him. People like the assistant warden was trying to comfort me. No, your husband loved you. And I was saying this, and I knew it. And he finally did find me that night. But I made it with the support of people there to get in an ambulance. I didn't want to. And then I realized my body was hurting from the violence. And so I had a wise boss who said, the fact that you survived it is that's what counts. And so I was thinking, yeah, I'm alive. And through that process, when I got home that night, was it that night? I remember a very close friend of mine called me, and he said, and he's a therapist, was a therapist, and he said, "Oh, I'm just returning your call from a couple of weeks ago. And he said, "How are you?" And so I felt comfortable enough to say, "Well, I just had this experience at work." And he said, "Oh, I heard something on the news, blah,
Oh,
blah, blah." And so, and I said, "I just need you to talk about anything. Talk about yourself. I don't want to talk. You talk." So he
yeah.
told me he had broken his leg, and it was just like a relief. And he was a very spiritual being. So he always gave me comfort when I didn't understand something. And I don't remember if he gave me any other wisdom that night, but it was just great comfort. And I knew instantly it was not by accident that he was the person who contacted me and connected. So that was,
Oh,
yeah, so that was, and I've read that who you connect with right after an assault is critical for the path that you take.
yeah.
And so he was part of it. And I made a commitment the next day that I was committed to my intuition, because everything in me that day was telling me not to go to work. I had been on family leave with my father dying, and I think that was my first day back after family leave. But everything was screaming inside, "Don't go to work." But I didn't listen. I felt like, no, I've got to get back. I've got work to do.
Oh,
So, so,
yeah.
so,
Oh, Nancy, I relate to so much that you're sharing, and I don't want to interrupt the story, but I do want to interject a couple of things before you continue, if that's okay with you. One, I've been sexually assaulted 3 times, and all 3 of the men who raped me seemed to feel that they hadn't raped me. The first one was a guy in college who would wave at me when he drove by in his little sports car. And the second one was a guy I worked with at work. He was a coworker, and he raped me, told me that the whole time I was saying no. I was on a drunken blackout, passed out. And so he's just kind of using my lifeless body. And apparently the only thing I'm saying in between, every so often, I'm saying no. And he knows that I'm saying no. And he tells me that I said no the whole time. But then he goes out and buys me flowers and thinks that we're going to be a boyfriend, girlfriend. It was shocking to me. And the third person was a serial rapist. This man was probably raping about 20 sex workers a month, because I actually accessed his bank account at the bank where he passed me a phony check. Not that I took checks back then, by the way, it was cash only, but he was raping me. So, okay, thanks for the check. And as I'm leaving, I mean, he had a whole system where there's bars on the door, bars on the window. You cannot get out. The door only locks with a key. He has the key. He weighs 3 times what I do. His arms are like the size of my thighs. They're huge. So I'm not going to resist this guy. I comply, and finally he lets me leave with this phony check. And what does he say to me? Can't wait to see you again. And this was actually a violent rapist. I am so glad that I didn't resist. 3 weeks later, he stabbed a girl in the face who did try to resist. So that whole thing, this what do we call this? Is it a disease? Is it a disconnect? Some place where for some men, and of course most men don't do these behaviors, but for some men, there's something in their training or their thinking or socialization, not sure, we'll unpack that in a minute, who actually don't understand that they are assaulting a woman, actually think this is some kind of courtship. It's just mind-boggling to me. But the other thing I wanted to say is that there is about 97% of all rape survivors have experienced some degree of tonic immobility, which is a phrase response. And tonic immobility actually makes it kind of goes beyond the phrase response. It's an advanced form of phrase response, which makes it almost, well, it literally makes it impossible for you to move or speak. And so that's a survival mechanism too. And I think it's so important that survivors know that we all share this. We've all felt that. And that's why it's so insane when somebody asks you, did you say no? Did you fight back? It's like tonic immobility. Okay, look it up. Okay, so anyway, thanks for allowing me to do my little rant here. If there's something that you want to comment on that, great. If you want to continue your story, please do.
Yes, I've had multiple violations too, and boundary invasions since I was tiny in different events.
Yeah.
And, but I knew with that event that was going to be the last one. That was 26 years ago, and that has been. And, I decided I was going to change my life. And of course, my marriage ended. I had to start over. I thought my work in the prison was finished, and I tried to find other work, and it didn't show up. And I figured out why I needed to go back. There were a lot of reasons. One, there were tons of inmates who needed to know I was okay, who cared for me. I understood the next day in the prison, there was like a silence across every prison in Maryland because of the shock and the after effects, and that most were not in favor of that. But anyway, the multiple violations and invasions is in the literature that many victims have had previous assaults. And there's explanations for that as well. I don't want to go into that at this moment. And that harkens to the problems with intimacy, which is one of the reasons I work with intimacy, because when I worked in the prison system, I had worked with offenders. I had worked with rapists, multiple rapists, all kinds of sex offenses. And those offenses are issues with intimacy. And not that this answers everything, but we don't train men about intimacy, to talk about it, to talk about their sexuality, to know that they do have that. It's normal. What is appropriate? What would consent look like? We don't have these. And then, of course, we have men. I'll just focus on men right now, who have been damaged because of their upbringing. When I first worked in the prison system, I would ask men, and I gave them what was called the hand test. It's a projective test for violence. And I would ask them if they'd been abused. And I quit doing the test. I quit asking them that because it was 100% were abused.
Oh.
And so, and again, not to excuse that, but I remember stories working with the offenders. And I worked in Fred Berlin's group that was in the prison, and he is into the hormonal treatment, the chemical castration.
Castration.
Yeah. So to speak. And but those who had reformed, I could experience those who had transformed, reformed. And I remember one of the serial rapists who was trained by his father that to go meet women and then violate her in the back seat, and he was a kid, he'd be in the front seat. He was basically trained.
Wow.
And that same offender had shared with me at a certain point, years after I'd been working there, that he said he really was at a point he could actually read a novel, a romance novel with sex, and he didn't get aroused. He didn't have to get any visualizations or imagery that was violent. It was all normal. And so I knew, even before he had told me that, I believe in healing, that that's absolutely possible.
Yeah.
And another man, I remember, he could see at that point when he was younger, if a woman smiled at him or a young teen smiled at him, he thought that meant she was interested in him. And he had such a deprived upbringing, such a twisted understanding of what intimacy, what connection with others was about. I remember another one who would spend hours in a tree just trying to get a peep of a woman in the bathroom for connection, because they don't even know what connection to another human is. And I remember, this is a more recent case, but someone I asked, well, when, because I sometimes work with men conjuring up the feeling of unconditional love from someone. But there are men who don't even have a memory. Maybe they haven't had that experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then there's a continuum of abuse that's severe. And I don't like that word abuse because there's so many interpretations of it. And I try to stay away from abuse and violation, assault, rape, and work with other terms to make it languageable, rather than bringing total polarization in. Because these,
Can you give us a sample of that? Because I'm really interested in finding a way forward culturally where we have absolute responsibility for our behaviors, and particularly if they're perpetrations and we've harmed another human being, we must be held accountable. But at the same time, I feel that we have tipped over into a cancel culture that doesn't chart a path forward for us, just creates a lot of shame and fear. So it actually has the net effect of driving these destructive, abusive behaviors below the surface where they can't be dealt with. And I want more people to come forward and say, I've perpetrated. Um, but the terminology is fraught. I'm interested to hear what kind of terminology you're working with.
well, I use the word invasion, boundary invasions, and I'll talk about physical or emotional. And of
Okay.
course, a physical has an emotional component, but it is a boundary invasion when a male babysitter misuses the time alone with you and performs oral sex, for example. That's a boundary invasion. And it's hard for someone to grasp what is rape because there's sort of a projection. It's over there, that happens to others, that happens to someone else over there.
Yeah.
Rather than it's so frequent. My dissertation was on rape blame, because there is this belief that it's the victim's fault. There's
Right.
this. And so I was going to make a point about and the
Nancy, one of the words that I have shifted is fault. I don't like the fault because fault is always about whose fault is it? And what I like is responsibility. How do we take responsibility for ourselves and our actions and whatever harm we have created in the world? Certainly, being attractive is not creating harm.
say that again.
Being attractive is not a form of harm.
Right.
Being flirtatious is not a form of harm. Being walking down a dark alley is not a form of harm.
Yeah.
So, but I like looking at how we can harm each other with our behaviors.
Okay, so I like that idea of responsibility, because then it gets into what's my responsibility with this experience, which is what I asked myself. And so, first and foremost, when you've been invaded, when you've been violated, it is your responsibility to heal yourself first. And there are so many modalities. And so, when I was 5 and when it was a babysitter who invaded me, it was 35 years of age when I went into psychodrama. And it was a series of events that got me there, and that helped start it. That didn't finish that event. I was in therapy. I found talk therapy helped some, because there's also a comfort in someone being present. But I also found very light trance, going into the whole experience again, and being able to be with it. And then also creative visualization, imagining exactly, different people worked with me on these different techniques on taking the event in our mind works with what it believes is true, and that we can replace an experience with a new experience. And so that helped. Since then, one of my favorite techniques is called counting. And now I learned that after I felt like I had done most of my healing, but I use it now. Self-compassion is another technique. And then there's tapping, there's EFT, emotional freedom technique. And so, that's part of the body. Which is, and the counting is very similar to the EMDR. And
Oh,
so
okay.
instead of the fingers, you're using your voice to help someone get into a rhythm and pair that with the memories. So there's two things going on. The
Yeah,
same
and
voice.
the EMDR is kind of like bilateral stimulation, which you can evoke some of those sensations during here. And as I understand it, it frees us up to revisit the trauma without going into a trauma response.
Yes, yes, okay. And again, not everybody wants to do this work, because I've met many people, and that's one of my sad points, is when somebody doesn't join in healing themselves and go through the process. But I respect everybody's at a different place and needs to handle that differently. But getting back to your languaging, I love the idea of responsibility rather than blame. And I'm thinking of shame, fear, and blame.
Yeah.
Those three are big components of this.
Shame,
And
fear, and blame. We could call that the unholy trinity.
okay, there you go. And so and I realized that, I got to tap into a deeper strength within myself than I would have known possible. And I really believe that that's available for all of us. And I remember a flash of an idea where I realized he was trying to kill me. And I thought, he can try to kill my body, but he cannot kill my spirit, my essence of who I am, my spirit. And that's the real us. We happen to be here in a physical experience, and so that's what everything goes back to, and that's what I decided to strengthen up and toughen up and work with. And so
Yeah, well, so in my journey, I have really found it fruitful to work through the trauma in the body. I agree with you. I think we are larger than these bodies. Um, and certainly I've done some journeys like, that have helped, plant-based journeys that have helped me see that I am not what has happened to me. I'm not what I've done, and I'm not even this body. But I think we put ourselves in these bodies specifically so we could process the intense, and I call it trauma. There's like a trauma heritage even, which is in our DNA. We know this now from epigenetics. So if you have any Holocaust survivors in your family tree, or anybody who went through a war, or maybe starvation, it's in us, right? And so we're processing that, and we're healing it through our bodies, not just for us, but also for the generations past and the generations to come. And I have so much um, respect for the modalities that I have worked with, like EMDR, internal family systems, which is IFS for short, which really helps us kind of look at all the different parts in us, and also yoga. I mean, really, my recovery really got boosted through yoga, because just being, I was also molested as a child by my father. So the trauma response is like really ingrained in this body, and it's felt incredibly oppressive. And I haven't been able to even meditate without disassociating until recently. And I found yoga was a path to getting that healing in my body, and therefore in my emotional body as well, without disassociating. And for some who have really been through a lot of trauma and have what is referred to as complex PTSD, it's essential to find some way. And I know, and I don't know if they were doing this at the time that you were working in the prison system, but I know some prison systems have actually started introducing trauma-informed yoga for the inmates.
and Vipassana. yoga too. But no, that was way after that was after I got out. But
Yeah.
I'm a proponent, I mean, a supporter of any of that to tame and create health and peace. Absolutely. And I wanted to come, I had this flash of a memory after the event, this event we're talking about for myself in the prison system. I remember resuming yoga classes. It took me a long time. And I would lay on the mat at first when we'd start out, and I would just, tears would come out
No.
and it would just be triggered. And I would feel a little embarrassed, like, gosh, is anybody looking at me? And I found nobody noticed it. I might be in a certain pose,
Yeah.
and I could feel them starting again. And then, but fortunately, I was able to know that I was supposed to do that and let that happen rather than stopping it. And I don't remember anybody commenting. In my head, I had a little thing I was going to say or come up with in case somebody asked me what was going on.
Yeah. Well, we often have our eyes closed in yoga class. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, right.
Nancy, you and I could unpack this for hours. I have a feeling you and I will be having multiple conversations, and I look forward to them. I want to make sure that we talk about how you turned your practice towards bringing healing towards men, and wondering if you could say a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, it sort of found me. um, I don't think I consciously came at it, but almost 20 years ago, I started having more men just ask me questions about sexuality, and wanting to understand themselves better in that area. So I knew that I better get more training in it. And so that started me on this path. And then I also did online dating for 14 years, and started out by just listening to Ariel Ford.
Yeah.
Know her from The Soulmate Secret, and she
Yeah.
used to do beautiful summits. And I learned,
I was just on a summit with her.
okay, and yeah, and I learned so much from her. And I started out with, because I was getting back into dating after the event, and after my marriage ended and my life ended as I knew. And oh, who's safe to be with? Well, oh, safety's up here. I decide who's safe, and I started learning so much about myself and how to converse, and Alison Armstrong, being in your feminine, not
Let me
having,
say, uh, just a correction. Ariel Ford has passed on. It's it's her sister that's still alive.
no, Debbie Ford died.
Oh, Debbie Ford. Okay, I thought. Thank you. I see. So Ariel Ford is the
Yeah,
one that I was on a summit with.
but
Okay,
Debbie was,
Debbie's work was, oh my God, so profound.
well, she's really the base for my belief system, which is all about the shadow. And I'm very Jungian, Jung, Jungian. And so we'll come back to that in a minute, because I want to talk about, the greater vision, and why when I stepped into this realm of, so men needing help with sex, dating, and understanding. And then I got so good at dating. I made so many mistakes. I got so good at dating, I could create it. It was fun. Then I turned it into, I never really landed with anybody. And I turned it into, like, well, let me see how I can make it good for him, fun for him. Oh, I'm nervous. Oh, then how do I help him calm down and not be? And then finally, I just felt like I wasn't interested in dating anymore, but I wanted to take what I'd learned and pay it forward and do something with it. And I thought, oh, men need so much help and support. I want to stand with them. I want to allow them to make mistakes. I'd hear women slam men for so many things, maybe just being normal men, being interested in them sexually. I mean, that's normal testosterone. That's not any different than our estrogen telling us that we're moody, or we need chocolate, or we just need to be in our little nest and don't talk to. So I started noticing that I wanted to transform even the way women were viewing men, and even sometimes how men might not be knowing how to stand for themselves. And there's a big sort of slamming of men, and oh, they're sex maniacs, or they're out for some, or and Alison Armstrong will say, guys are not hairy women. They are.
So I understand what you're saying, but I also want to address the fact that the kind of sexual harassment that Me Too called out is unacceptable, and that there's reason for women to be angry about that. I think it's really important that both men and women learn new ways of relating to each other. So I would think you would agree with this. We don't want to normalize the type of boundary invasions that don't actually become a sexual assault or rape, but it's just, the boss putting a little pressure on his secretary to show some quote unquote loyalty in order to get a raise. Those type of things that we just want to make sure that we're really calling out that those things are absolutely unacceptable. And,
Yes.
and how do we start actually moving away from what has been normalized in the culture, which often has been incredibly oppressive for women, and start moving into a place where we can celebrate our sexuality? Because I think canceling people, shaming people, and like you were saying, slamming them doesn't accomplish the end goal of transforming the culture to something that's safe and consensual. Do you agree?
Uh, yeah, I wanted to go into that a little bit because I just remembered why I mentioned my dissertation and blame.
Yeah.
Um, the whole, at the very end of a dissertation, you write what you recommend, and one of my recommendations were dialoguing. We need to talk. We need to have these conversations.
Right.
Men need to know what's right and what's wrong. They don't know. They haven't known, and we're in a different era now where women are allowed to say no. Women are to say no. Do they know how to do we really know how to do that? I think we're still evolving to do that properly.
Yeah.
And for men to fully understand that, and the responsibility they have to heal that, takes discussions around intimacy. That when and so blame, if we're just going to blame him and he's bad, absolutely, she's entitled to be angry, to feel whatever, to do whatever she needs to do to market, to have her event be an event, be something serious for her, and to do whatever it is that she needs to do with it. And but if we're going to leave men as the bad guys over there, and then put a fence around them, and we're going to move them to another planet, that's not healing.
No,
They're,
no, it's not healing. And it hasn't materialized yet much. It has a little bit, but I think we are not looking at the ways in which female identified people feel entitled to touch. So it's almost like there's kind of a double standard, like I can touch you. And I'm telling you, Nancy, I was facilitating a workshop on Me Too. It was mixed gender, male and female. And we ended up getting into some discussions about, as women, expecting men to say yes, and being angry if they don't. And also I noticed at one point, I just touched the leg of one of my male participants, and I realized I don't even think about my female entitlement to touch at will. If I want to touch your arm or your back or your waist or your leg, hey, I'm a woman, so it's okay. Have you
yeah.
experienced that?
Well, I had experiences early on as a therapist where I started reading men and their discomfort. So I have made some errors, I'm sure, even just getting too close to a guy.
Yeah.
And then I became aware of the power a woman has over a man because of a neighbor expressed that her husband found me attractive or something, and I had no idea. And I started becoming more respectful of that, and watching that, and feeling very responsible to create safety, to the point where in the last decade, I've even said to men, I'm safe. I mean, you can try, you can approach me, you can say what you want to say. It's not, I'll take care of both of us. I create safety for both of us.
But isn't that kind of an emotional labor that women don't want to engage in now? Because we want men to take responsibility for themselves.
Well, that's a different issue. I feel, because I'm at such an aware, and I hate to say that I'm like better than anybody, not that, because I'm so sensitive to this whole arena, and understand, once you're aware, you're responsible. Once you're aware, you have to carry something. It's not unfair. It's a privilege that I'm the one that now knows this, and to put it in place. If I see a guy do something that crossed a boundary, I get to say that to him. Do I do it 100%? No. I was at a conference 2 years ago, and a guy sat too damn close to me, and I took about 5 minutes to finally get myself up and leave. And I reflected back and thought, wow, that was lame, Nancy.
You gave up your space.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I didn't use my words to say, I think I was floored. I think I was shocked because I hadn't been in a situation like that. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
So I like to think of myself as I'm aware enough. And once I know something, I'm going to do it. I've got to, this is mine to put in.
Well, let me see if I can feel my way into some of what you're sharing here, because I think some of the common ground that we might share is the idea that as an empowered woman, I get to assert myself. And I don't have to do it in a way that makes the other person wrong or bad. That's not the point here. The point is to be really sitting in my power. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. And I was thinking, see, to be in our power, we are emotional, physical, mental, sexual, sensual, spiritual. We're all beings. And so to be in our power, we must have our feelings. If I'm angry at this violator, then I have to experience, I want to give myself experiencing that, because that's where I'm at right now. In fact, I think to my babysitter violator, I remember being at my kitchen table. I could not write a letter to him angrily about what he'd done to me until I was really, I had something set me off, and I went, I'm writing that letter now.
Ready now.
I went to town, and it never, it wasn't ever sent, of course. I don't know where he is.
I understand.
But yes, and so wherever we are, it's called spiritual bypassing if we try to forgive, or we try to get too airy-fairy. No, we need each of the levels of development, and it is important. Just because I'm called to help men now become aware, one of the things I do is I'm always working in, when she has a stoppage in lovemaking at any point, pause.
Yep.
Give her a space. You may have an opportunity to heal a past non-positive sexual experience. We talk about sex positivity. Well, there's sex negativity. And you have so much in your relating to help heal that that is just ripe for potentiality, and it's your responsibility as a man. And women need you to know that. They need you to help them with these things.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. And I think that pause is crucial. So when you're talking about helping men understand the conversation to penetration, which I think is where we have landed on that topic now. I think that's what you're talking about, is if it's going to be a conversation, then you can't show up as a sexual performer. You can't show up as somebody who's trying to take charge of the interaction. I think it calls more for partnership and back and forth, and listening and asking questions. And then, Nancy, I feel like this becomes a difficult terrain for a lot of men. Empathy and intuition. Like, if your point of reference is that you are not connected to your body and you're not connected to your emotions, how do you start to pay attention and connect with those more subtle cues that happen during the course of sex?
Well, there's a lot from what you just asked. That's a big question. Um, One of the things that flashed in my mind was learning listening skills, and educating yourself as a man, attending things that programs I offer, programs that a lot, so there's a lot of coaches offering programs for men. There's more and more literature written now, him actually educating himself, learning what a woman wants and needs. And there's also a big chunk of consent. What is consent? We really need to adapt. And I advocate in my webinar in the 5 step, check in with her, ask her, is this okay? Are we okay with going? I like all kinds of cues, and I work on teaching him to listen to her vocalizations, her her ah, or if she doesn't answer you, that's not a yes. If she goes silent and you ask, that's not a yes.
That's why we're back to tonic immobility. It's like and I think it's so important to call out sexual dimorphism. It's true that not all female bodies and not all male bodies are sized so that the male body is bigger and stronger. But by and large, the vast majority of male bodies are bigger than female bodies and have more strength. And even if they don't, there's still a power differential in the culture. So that tonic immobility can kick in right in the middle of consensual sex. So we really do need to start checking with each other.
Yes, yes. And see, women do need to help men, and they women would benefit by knowing how little men know. I get men who say, I've been married this many years, and my wife didn't know that I didn't know these things that you interviewed this expert on. She
Yeah,
didn't even know that I didn't. They've been married, I think he said 40 years. This was one
yeah,
case.
it doesn't
Um,
surprise me.
and I not only never had a guy really comfortably bring me into a conversation about sexuality. I don't think I ever had that in dating. So that was one of my big jump off places, that I was determined to help men create that, because I think women are dying for that, dying to feel safely invited into a conversation about sex. And
Oh, yeah,
yeah, isn't,
yeah.
yeah.
And
And and get this,
what
get
have you
this,
experienced with
get
the men?
this. When I talk to men, they tell me, I've opened up to you more than I've opened up to any woman.
Of course.
More than I did to my first wife. And maybe I've been dating now for years.
Well, I work
I
with both
just-
men and women and couples
But
and
I just learned, I was even
yeah.
assuming that some men must be inviting women in. And what I'm getting is, not only that's not happening, but they're not having these conversations.
Nancy, I work with couples. I have had them sitting in my office right next to each other. We're going to have a conversation about their sex life. They've been married for 20 years. And I asked them, do you know if your partner feels whatever, whatever? And they're like, I assume. And I go, well, they're sitting right here. Would you like to ask them? And they're like, no, you ask them. It's crazy. But I think that this conversation to penetration is something that people of all genders need. Would you agree?
Yes, yes. And my stages are for anybody, anybody. In fact, the last stage is penetration. The one before that is sensual touch, orgasmic touch. And we know we don't need penetration.
Yeah.
Women don't need penetration. Our gay sisters have taught us that. And if you don't get her to a 9 or 10 and you don't have consent, still can't have penetration. But that's not, we don't talk about these things. And what do we do if we do go past? And what about regrets the morning after? What if she says to you, we went too far. I really wasn't, that needs to be talked about. Now, I don't think he needs to be sent to prison and punished and blamed for the rest of his life, because he might say, how would I have known?
Yeah.
I can't, there are many men who say, but how would I know? how would I have known?
Well, this is the thing, in this conversation that you and I have had today, we have talked about brutal rape, and we have talked about serial rapists. And we've also talked about husbands who may be violating their wife's consent. And these are not on equal playing fields. And I think it's so important that we start nuancing our conversation about consent. Because if we don't, it's like we just keep throwing it all together. And I think it's outrageous. And I say this as a sexual assault survivor. The first guy who raped me in college, I wouldn't want to see him sent to prison. I don't think he knew he raped me. I had tonic immobility. I became speechless. Was he an asshole? Yes.
Mm.
But unless he went on to have a rape career that I'm not aware of. And the serial rapist that raped me, oh yeah, I'd like him to be in prison for sure. Because he's been out there doing it to so many women, and he stabbed that girl. So can we have a conversation about these things without negating the trauma of being sexually harassed on the job? I have been sexually harassed on the job. It's horrible. I left entire careers in the dust because of sexual harassment on the job. But it's not the same as being raped by a serial rapist. And I know that because I've lived through both.
Mhm.
You feel that way?
Um, I believe all of these situations need to be out in the open, discussed, and repaired. And our society, our prisons don't even know how to handle all that. We don't have solutions yet. So I'm all about enhancing and bringing about a pathway for solutions, because my greatest one is that people will become aware. And we don't need everybody. We need 51% to get the critical mass aware, and
Yeah.
then there'll be a shift. But we're just starting this deconstructing and then constructing now, because men haven't, I don't think they really have the full understanding of how much consent you need to say to her, may I hold your hand? I don't think you can overdo it. Now, I got feedback from one of my participants in one of my webinars, wanted to know if, because I went through the 5 stages, if her thought it was 13-year-old daughters could watch it. And I said, yes, with you being present is the way that I would do it.
Yeah.
And one of them watched it and said, I would find it annoying to have to keep answering to him, checking in, because even if she's laying next to you and you want to touch her a certain way, I recommend, can I touch you this, unless you really know her and you understand her language and her nuances. Well,
Yeah.
the dean was saying that would be annoying. I think that'd be annoying to me. I'd rather a woman say, yeah, I already said you take me,
That's quite, there is, we do have, and we're going to have to end soon, Nancy. I really would love to keep talking with you, but I have clients that I have to go help, and I'm sure you do too. But the um, the idea that we have this script as female identified people, that we're going to get swept off our feet by this guy. And Meredith Chivers did some research about what turns women on. And it's this fantasy that this guy comes along and ravishes you, but he does it exactly right and at the right time and in the right way. And he's absolutely drop dead gorgeous, of course. And so if we have this script, and I am as guilty of this as anybody else, raised on the kind of films that they were putting out in the 60s and 70s, where, I mean, it was date rape, basically, being presented as a form of romance. So when I think about what part of the conversation can we as women enter into, I think a lot of it is like looking at the scripts that we have that might not be consensual, and therefore make it difficult for us to move forward into consent for all genders.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the point you're making. And I like that you, from the get-go, when you and I've spoken before we even today,
Yeah.
you're very aware of consent and how non-consensual so much of intimacy is right now, and that, that ain't right. Yeah, I'm glad that you're bringing awareness to that.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you and I can talk about how we want to heal it for all genders. We don't want to castigate a particular gender, in this case, male gender,
Mhm.
as the perpetrator and the problem. We have a problem that we have all co-created, regardless of our gender. And, granted, most of us didn't create it, it was handed to us, but we have the opportunity to change it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good
Steve,
place.
go ahead.
Good place to end it. That we have an opportunity to change.
We have an
Yeah.
opportunity to change it. Nancy, I want to make sure that our viewers know how to find you, particularly the men who want to have this conversation to penetration.
Okay.
How can they find you? And of course, I'm going to post all the links below.
Thank you. Thank you. A Man's Guide to Intimacy is the URL.com. So a man's guide to intimacy.com. That's the website. And in there, on the front page, there is a free cheat sheet that you can enter your email and get a PDF. And I go through a quick way to get through those stages and tips for men. If they're in, or when, it doesn't matter, whoever wants to download it, please do. But my stuff is geared towards men. Of course, it's applicable to all genders, to anyone who's interested. And I do get mail, I get inquiries from all over the spectrum. So I love it. I love it. Just that I'm niching in, trying to focus for myself right now to heterosexual men.
Absolutely. And it's a conversation that needs to take place for heterosexual men. I'm so glad that you're putting this out there. One of the things that really excites me about your work, and I know I'm going to be a guest on your upcoming summit. Do you want to tell them about that?
Oh, I'd love to. I get to interview 21 experts on men's intimacy. And yours truly, Veronica Monet, is going to be one of the experts. John Gray, Susan Bratton, Wendy Newman. I don't know how many people know TJ Bartell. There's a lot of very interesting. I've even got a porno star, an ex-porno star guy. Yeah, he's going to be
Oh,
interviewing. Yeah, I think it's going to be so much fun.
yeah.
And if you go to my website, or if you go to my Facebook business page, Dr. Nancy Moonstarr, I will have postings there of the series. It's going to be starting to be invited into April 15th on tax day. You can opt in, and I'm going to start it live on May Day, May 1st.
Right on. Right on.
So
Well,
thank you for asking.
I'm excited to be a part of it. And one of the things that really excites me about your work is the fact that you're pulling the men in. I am a guest on so many webinars, and they are all for women. And we're not going to get anywhere if there is no self-help and self-improvement for people who are identified as male. Just not. So thank you so much for being in the shame-free zone. And thank you for bringing love to the equation of consent.
Oh,
Oh, you too.
okay.
Thanks, Nancy.
All right. Big hug.
We got to you too. Virtual hug.
Okay.